Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Trust the Process. Today we have a lovely guest, Marcy, on. As you will have heard from the introduction, Marcy came on the podcast some time ago. I can't even remember when. I think it was at least a year ago that I released the episode, and it was at least 2 years ago that we recorded the episode. To come out in divine timing. But if you haven't listened to that, obviously go and listen to that. But I will just hand it over to Marcy so she can introduce/reintroduce herself, and we'll see how this differs to the first introduction that she did.
Oh my God, that's going to be a really fun comparison because I feel like I have gone through at least 7 major identity upgrades since then. So I'm actually curious to how I introduced myself last time. So I'm Marcy. I am a spiritual teacher and an energy healer, and I'm on a mission to help people, particularly women, in embodied spirituality. So being able to work within the beautiful, potent power of your energy centers, being able to use and tap into the energy of the life-given force that lies within your womb so that you can fully step into being a feminine but grounded and confident and secure woman and a life giver and a life creator.
I love that. I can't remember what your last introduction was, but I'm going to be so intrigued to see how it differs, and also it would be interesting to know, like, if we'd have done an episode in between now and then, how that would have differed as well. And that's something that I want to come back to, but we are going to dive straight in onto what might seem like a really random topic, but we're going to talk about the concept of free time, because over Christmas, I've got the messages right here on my phone. It was the 22nd or the 21st of December when Marcy sent me this ambiguous text saying that the concept of free time is so strange to her, that someone was asking her, what do you do in your free time? And it was kind of like, what do you mean free time? It's time. Like, what is this concept of free time? How did we come up with it? And as soon as Marcy sent me that text, I was like, oh my gosh, I really want to record a podcast episode on this. I don't even know how it's going to go. But yeah, I don't even know where to go from that. But
yeah. Oh my God. No, it does actually just baffle me, because I know that for a lot of people who, let's say, aren't enlightened to this to their spiritual experience, they do see that as, working the job. Most people now working full time, and then they do the housework and like maybe carrying things and whatever, and then the rest of the time is the free time. And I guess if I think about what is the opposite of free time, I would see it as occupied time. And to me, that baffles me because, well, one, I don't work a full-time job. Even yes, I don't work. But that's the thing, like, I work sometimes every day, but it's very intentional because I'm very intentional with my energy and what I use and what I use my time for. So I don't see any of my time as free, because to me, time is just a possibility, and I like to assess things on the go and feel into it. So to give a very tangible example, I was texting with a friend a few hours earlier, and she was like, oh, do you have space? Do you have the space to call this afternoon or tonight? And I love the idea of space so much more than time, but she's also very much like us, which is why she phrased it like that. Well, actually, I just need like another hour to finish up what I'm doing here. Then my plan was either to use that time on doing some extra bits and bobs or going away and reading my new fiction book that I'm reading right now before our call. And some could describe that as like the free time. And you could say, yes, I had the free time to call my friend, but I don't see it as that because it's all very intentional to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, when I look at my whole week and everything that I do, I'm like, I don't know what counts as free time. Is me going to gym my free time? Is me going into what I call my woman cave, which is where I dance and do my womb rituals and create all sort of feminine and spiritual magic? Is that my free time? Is me talking to you right now my free time? I don't understand.
Yeah, that's literally it. It's like I don't understand this concept, because when you were saying that, I was thinking, okay, what's the opposite of free time? And I just thought the opposite of free time is then captive time.
Yeah, that's so
That
true.
is like, yeah, that is so beyond. That's like not even a limiting belief. That's like next level. That's like this extreme programming that we have to believe that, I suppose in a way you could say it's true if you're looking at things on like a societal level of like how we work, who we work for, the centralized systems and banks into which our money isn't even ours, and things like that. Then I suppose if you're looking at it that, you could say like, yes, then that is captive time. But if you're looking at it from like a universal perspective, that's still just a perception. That's not like the objective truth. That's just the outcome of the reality that most of us live in. But we can still break free from that, even if we still live within those structures, if that makes sense.
That's so true, because for a lot that, like, the way that I see it is there will be people who will have to remain in those structures because for this lifetime maybe they weren't aligned to break out of them. And at the end of the day, there are certain quite a lot of parts of the society that do need to continue to function. We can't all just quit our 9-to-5s and go and be self-employed. There are certain things that need to be put in place. Well, I guess if we were to really explore, I guess you could find a way and argue that, yeah, we could all become self-employed, but that's not going to work for everyone. Also, let's not assume that's what everyone wants, right? So let's instead assume that actually the structure of the time where you work full-time is a desired outcome for a lot of people, yes, but it is still about how you view it and how you approach it. But then I think about, even if we step away from your perception towards the 40 hours that you're putting in every week to work for someone else, if all you have outside of that is free time, what is the value of free time? Like, what does it actually mean? Because if the rest of it is occupied or captive or whatever you want to call it, what is the significance of free time? Like, what is there, in your occupied time, you know what you're meant to do. You have a destination, there's a purpose for it. How are you meant to fill the free time?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because also that can then seep into your reality, even if you are, let's say, self-employed and living your quote unquote ideal dream life, whatever. You're still going to get into the habit, because it's programming, of viewing certain things as free time and other things as whatever, occupied time, or things that I have to do. Or like, I think that's what I said in one of my replies initially, was like, these things that we've decided make up our whole life, and then anything outside of that is free time. But if it's free, then it's like you're kind of implying, I suppose, that that's been given to you. By whom? Who's given you that time? Who's given you that freedom? Who's given you, this is the time where you can do what you want, or this is the time that you can decide, like, this is your free time, so this is the time that you can decide the value of.
Mm.
That has already been decided, but it's like, has it? I don't think so. I don't think it has.
Yeah. That's so true, actually. But then I feel like that's so interesting because what's coming to my mind is throughout the summer, I was looking after my baby nephew like full time.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this one instance when unexpectedly, his parents were like, you know what, right? Okay, this is your day off. Like, go do whatever. And I was like, oh my God, I have this free time. Suddenly. That's how I viewed it because I was committed and responsible for looking after him. And then suddenly it's like they gifted me this free time.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually remember being in a frenzy about this because I was like, oh my God, how do I fill this? How do I make the most of it? What would be the most meaningful thing to fill this time with?
Mm-hmm.
But and I don't know what point I was trying to make, but there's something there. Um, but then when I think about free time, to me it just feels quite empty.
Mm-hmm.
The energy that it gives off is like, yeah, like empty and meaningless.
Mm-hmm.
Because I would argue my schedule allows for a lot of flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
And if I feel like there's space that needs to be made for whatever, I
Mm-hmm.
can make that work, which I completely understand is an enormous privilege. And I am incredibly grateful. But when you think about everything that I do throughout the week, I'm still like, which element of it is free time? Is it my time in devotion to God, in devotion to me? Is me working free time because I'm choosing my schedule?
Mm.
So yeah, it is baffling.
Yeah, that's interesting because when you said that just now about because that's what you're choosing, then that brings in the whole conversation about freedom of will versus
Mm,
everything being predetermined. Um, and I suppose maybe at the crux of it, it's that because then you could start arguing, like, well, even if you're in a job that you don't particularly like, you still chose it, not in a kind of what's the word? Like victim type sense, but just in a sense of like, oh, you technically chose it because you went to the interview, like on a very like baseline like level.
mhm.
Not trying to say this is your fault, you're in this job you don't like, but yeah, on a really basic level, like you chose it, but then someone else who doesn't necessarily believe in free will might then argue like, yes, technically you chose to do those things, but it wasn't your choice because you didn't have the free will to choose to do it.
That's very true.
Like finding out what is free time, because it's true, it's when you place like intentions and things as well, because obviously now we're recording a podcast episode, but if we were having this exact conversation just on a video call, which is kind of like the thing we would talk about, just
Yeah.
would that be considered free time versus this, or would it only be free time if we did it spontaneously, or
That's so true.
you know?
Yeah, like what is it? Because we did this very spontaneously. So
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, did I suggest that we do this tonight?
Mhm.
Because I had the free time, and did you say yes, let's do it tonight because you had the free time? Or is it that we had an intention?
This is definitely like a concept that has no definitive
No.
conclusion. So if anyone out there listening was hoping that we were going to like come to a conclusion, that was definitely never going to happen in this conversation. But it's just all
Yeah.
open-ended, and I just think it's interesting to hear those perceptions of just, yeah, because they are things that you just say like, oh, I've got some free time now, what shall I do it with? Or I think you also mentioned something about hobbies as well, like when people ask you what your hobbies were, but I can't remember what you said. What your
Okay, yeah. See, this is just me being very complex, and one thing that I always say to people is there's never a straightforward answer with me. Like, you'll ask me what's your favorite fruit or what's my favorite anything. It always depends.
No, wait, can I just stop you right there? I don't know if you remember, but you said that on the first podcast.
Really?
Yes, that's like the only thing I remember from the whole podcast, because we were in France that whole time. But we literally spoke about that, and we both, I can't remember what the context was.
Oh my God.
But you used that exact example, and you said that. Isn't that crazy?
My God. That is wild. I literally have no recollection. Well, some things haven't changed.
That's crazy.
Wow, I love that so much. So, well, for anyone who's not listened, it's never a straightforward answer. Everything always depends, because it depends on the weather, my mood, what I fancy, my my menstrual cycle. God, that's a huge determinator, like I'm a different person very often. So hobbies wise, I'm the same. Of like, I've got a lot of interest and a lot of passion and love for the things that I do. But for example, last night I was just sat in this exact spot painting, and I love painting. I love creating. Is it my hobby? Maybe. But I don't do it because I'm like, hey, I love painting, or it's my hobby. I'm like, I do it because I feel the creative desire to create something. Like, I love yoga. I've always counted it as one of my interests. So some could argue that's my hobby. But do I do it because it's my hobby? No, I do it because I love it. It makes me feel good.
I feel that because I've always been like, what people call like a multi-passionate person. I've always been that since I was a child, and it's never changed. It's certainly gone through stages of changing what those passions are, sometimes them being suppressed, sometimes coming back out again, whatever it is. But I've always struggled ever since I was a child when people would say to me, what are your hobbies? Or whether it was in school or a relative or whatever. And then when I couldn't answer, or when I struggled to answer, I distinctly remember them being not like super surprised, but kind of surprised in the sense of like, oh, Claudia, but you've got loads of hobbies. Like I always see you doing different things, whether that's
no way
the drama school, whether that's playing tennis with your friends, whether that's riding your bike up and down the block, whether that's playing Scrabble with your grandma, or I used to have these obsessions of like, I would go into these like, I would watch films and then I would go into like fixations on like certain characters in certain films. And like, I remember one of them was Pirates of the Caribbean, and I was obsessed with Captain Jack Sparrow. And I would just like, I'm really like outing myself here, but it was just like mixed between like an obsession and also this thing of like, I just want to be him. Like I want to be Captain Jack. And so I would have a poster of him, and then also I would like pretend to be him. And I remember I made my own like jar of dirt because that was in one of the photos.
Oh my God.
So like, is that a hobby?
That's so precious. Maybe, yeah, impersonating.
Exactly. And then if that is a hobby, what's the hobby? Like, is the hobby impersonating the person, or is the hobby really enjoying films, or is the hobby deeply analyzing the characters? Because then when I act like the characters, all of the characters are so different. So I can't say that making a jar of dirt is my hobby. Because
that's so true. But you can only make so many jar of dirt, I think.
I remember being so proud. I was like, I've made my jar of dirt.
That is beautiful. I am grateful that you shared it.
That's so funny. But I do feel like even when you were talking, I really felt my inner child coming out in this conversation. Like it just seems so silly, but really profound at the same time.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. I was recording like an energy transmission for chakra initiation event I'm going to be holding next week, and the last thing that came through was some inner child in the solar plexus. So this is on brand. I like it. And you know what really gets me with the hobbies? I love working. I love my business. I love being in service. I love what I do.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I feel like what I do defines me a lot. And what I do is who I am.
Mm-hmm.
So then people ask me, like, what are my hobbies? And I'm like, well, working, I guess. But I feel like working such a, like, it really downplays the extent of what that means to me and what it actually involves. Like, I love coming onto my stories, sharing things, sharing personal life. I love marketing. I love creating reels. I love writing emails to my mailing list. I love it all. And not even get me started on actually being in service and delivering sessions. But for a lot of people, that's not a desirable response, that I love working. And I love praying to God. That also gets some looks. Like I am so passionate about devoting time to God and myself and my womb. It's like, what's your hobby? Work? Working for me, working for God.
Worship.
Oh my God. That is, I have a one line a day diary. As I think you know. That is today's entry.
Oh, I'm gonna put that as my entry today as well. We're gonna be matching.
Oh, you've got one too?
Yeah, I'm on my last year. It's falling apart. Mine. It's like,
oh my God.
It's got character. I'm embracing it, but I'm gonna try and commit to the new one being a bit more in order, because I reread all of my entries from the previous years, and sometimes I cannot. It's just I cannot read what I put, because it's like last thing before I go to bed. It doesn't matter. Sometimes I've been deliriously tired. Sometimes I've been like drunk or something. And I come back and I just scribble something in my diary.
Oh my God, I love it so much. This is part of my hobby.
Yes. Yes.
It actually is.
Yes, I think I just kind of realized that's what it is, isn't it? It's like when that hobby, so to speak, or free time is so ingrained in your life, whether that's like your life as a whole and how you define yourself, or whether that's your daily tasks, or whether it's your job, or whether it's your what you do outside of your job. Like when those things are so ingrained in your life, it makes those definitions, defining those, makes categorizing them hard, because then it's like, okay, so technically teaching yoga can't be my hobby anymore because I now get paid for it, but it's no different to when I did it before. If anything, I enjoy it more because now I'm doing it and I am getting paid for it, so it's much more viable to, you know, create retreats and create all of these different things. So that's so funny. And I just Googled, I was like, what is the actual definition of hobby? So I Googled it and it said, an activity done regularly in one's leisure time for pleasure.
Right, define leisure time.
What do you mean in one's leisure time? So if it's not in my leisure time, then it's not a hobby. So I have no hobbies then.
Wait, leisure time. Oh, we've done a full circle here. I've just Googled leisure time meaning time when one is not working or occupied, free time.
Oh no, it's like they heard us. They had to add that colon, like free.
Okay, so working is not my hobby.
But then it's like, it's kind of instigating. So you've only got work time and non-work time. Is that what life has been divided up into? Like, is that, it's just so strange to me. Like, And then I think that is what keeps a lot of people stuck, because if you're so separate of like work time and then free time or non-work time, you then are going to be less likely to find stuff in your so-called free time that you want to infuse into your work, or whether it's your professional life or creative projects, or something you want to do on the side, or a business venture you want to do with a friend. Like, you're going to be less likely, when you separate those things so drastically, to infuse one into the other.
Oh my God, that's exactly what it is. Because the idea of the working time and then free time is because you're disconnected from yourself and your work. You're disconnected from your vision and what you're meant to be doing, which is why it is only occupied time and free time.
This is crazy. I'm going to need to do a lot of grounding before I go to bed tonight. I'm going to need to bring myself back down to earth from the ether. This is crazy. I feel like we've cracked the code, actually.
Yeah. So, okay. So it's about actually being invested in your work, being connected to it, which
Or
is
having less separation in general.
yeah.
Because the more separation, the less open you are. The more separation there is, the more rigid you are, the more disconnected, but yeah, also the less open you are. And not that there's anything wrong with that, because I think, you know, for some people who really like that rigid structure, it can be nice, especially if they do have a job that they enjoy, to like go to work and then, I'm going to laugh every time I say free time now. Sometimes it is nice for people to, yeah, go to work and then after work to say, okay, that's that done. Now I'm going to go to a yoga class, or go to the gym, or go to a sound bowl or cooking class or whatever, and have that separation. But I think that's quite a rare, like, you have to be a really grounded, structured, like a stable person, really intentional person, to be able to be okay with that separation and to genuinely enjoy the work that you do. Because I find Carlos, my boyfriend, is like that, but he really enjoys the work that he does. And so he does separate the two, but he enjoys them both a lot. So for him, that's okay. And he's like a very grounded, down to earth person.
But I wonder if he'd still see the time outside of work when he's like doing whatever as free time. Because thinking about my last job before this, I was like, I enjoyed the work. It was full time, and I'm not cut out for the full time life at all. And I was still I had to be very intentional. I was still not seeing the time away from it as my free time. If anything, it was the opposite. That time outside of work became even more precious because there was so little of it.
Oh my gosh, that just made me think as well. In especially, well, because I don't know if you've had this, but I've had this when I've had jobs in the past where it's not like that I've never had a job that I really hated, that I really, really didn't like, but I've had jobs that I just knew I either didn't, I don't know, like it wasn't, I don't know, there was just something that I didn't like about it. And maybe it was just me not working for myself, like it could be as simple as that. But it got to the point where, like, the night before, in my free time, I'd be thinking about the next day. And then, like, when I'd come home, like you said, it's not really free time, because then that time becomes more precious. And ironically, that is kind of the opposite, the other side of the coin, to what we said about infusing the two. That's still infusing the two, but in a more, like, let's say, quote unquote, negative way, because you're infusing the two to create this cycle of, oh, my time is precious, but you're not viewing that in a positive way. You're viewing that in a kind of, I don't know, yes, a scarcity way, and it becomes a cycle. Whereas the other type of infusion is the one, like I said, where you don't see that separation and where you take things from one and implement them into the other
Mm,
and see how they can coexist
that is
to
very
create
true.
more rather than to have more scarcity or to have less.
Yeah, this
Wow.
is very true. But then, like, the thing that keeps on coming back into my head is like, I feel like it's very easy for us to have that attitude. And because we have the freedom, we have created the freedom and the space to actually be able to do this, to even be able to, have this very spontaneous conversation that we're having right now. But then there's a lot of people, like when I think about, let's say, maybe family now,
Mhm.
they wouldn't be able to make that. And I think about them and I'm like, how would they? How could they? People who aren't necessarily spiritual or religious, how can they create that connection? And I'm struggling.
Mm. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And I think I don't know. I
It's
think
a,
it's definitely sorry, go on.
no, I was just gonna say I think it is difficult, but I think like everything, it kind of starts with an awareness.
Yeah.
Like, not everything is as it seems. Like
Mhm.
it's not like I don't know. I think maybe it's just a case of starting to think a bit outside the box and thinking like, okay, what does that actually mean to me? Like, what does it mean to me to have free time? How do I value my time when I'm doing my quote unquote hobbies? Is that do I see that as a complete separation from my daily life that involves earning money and completing tasks and doing things that I quote unquote have to do to live, and
Mm,
actually helping me live, and vice versa? Like, is it a productive cycle, or is that separation just something that I've kind of just accepted just is, and I'm just kind of walking through it?
yeah. I
And do I
think you're
actually
right.
enjoy it, like that, the relationship between those two things?
I think you're right. It is about the whole reconnecting back with your doing, because even if you don't like it, one, you're in it, you have chosen it.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's either, stay the same, so still make the choice to stay,
Mm-hmm.
or to change it. But in order to do that, it's good to reconnect with why you're in it in the first place. Like, what is it bringing you, so that it does feel more personal rather than just something that is essentially a means to an end.
Mm.
I think that's what it is. A lot of people do go through the notions of, or the motions even, of, getting through it as opposed to being in it.
Oh yes, that's so true. That's so true, because even if you enjoy it, even if it's something that you enjoy while you're going through it, it's still a different experience to being in it. And actually being in it means that you might actually enjoy it less for some time, but it means that you, you're really inhabiting that role of the one that's experiencing what it is that you're experiencing the things with which you're filling your life, rather
Exactly.
than doing it because you're on earth. Like, oh well, might as well just do this.
Whatever. Yeah, I'm here now anyway. Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that's something that can be applied to everything, really, every situation,
Mhm.
everyone, regardless of, whether you're working 3 hours a week or 300. Like, it's about being in it, being present, being involved, noticing, observing, being connected, as opposed to getting through it and just seeing it as like task, 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 things I need to get done, check it all off. Like, actually experiencing what you're experiencing.
Mm, definitely. Well, we fixed that problem then.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. So we didn't quite fully wrap our heads around the idea of leisure and free time and hobbies, but we fixed the attitude.
Exactly. So let's pivot completely, or
Yeah.
probably we'll find a way to interlink everything.
Yeah, we always do.
Yeah. Funnily enough, this is like we've only done one other. Well, actually, no, we did the 2 episodes. We did one on my podcast and one on yours. But I feel like this is still a really unstructured conversation, but it's probably the most structured conversation we've had because there were actual things that we wanted to cover.
That's so true.
So going on a bit of a U-turn slightly, it would be crazy if we didn't talk about God in this episode.
Yeah.
Something that I think we did talk about in the last episode that we did together, actually. I don't really remember much about what we talked about. I just remember this kind of conversation about mixing the notions of the universe and God, and like how we were kind of starting to see that through a new lens and see the character of both things being different. And maybe initially it seemed like we were stepping away from one and going into the other, but actually it was like we were just kind of creating a new lens on all of it. So not really a question leading into that. But let's just talk about how we kind of think about the concept of finding God in this world that's like consistently or constantly seeking spirituality or seeking to know things and seeking to find things, whether that's answers, whether that's beliefs, practices, whatever it is. What does it mean then to actually find God in that?
I think in order to find God, you need to find yourself, and that you shouldn't be seeking God. You should be seeking yourself, because God is always there. Like, God is always speaking, but you're not always there for yourself, because your mind can play tricks on you. Your nervous system can be dysregulated. Maybe there's like whatever energy and shit you're carrying in with you within your being. Like, that can make you not completely trust yourself or not understand your body's cues. I've just done a episode about this myself, actually. Literally went live today about a conversation I overheard in an airport where a girl was saying that she can't understand whether she's feeling nervous or hungry, so she just ends up eating. So I ended up doing a whole podcast episode about this. And I think the process is actually about finding yourself, so that you do understand the wisdom of your body, so that you do understand your intuition, so that when your intuition, when God, when universe, whatever you want to call it, wants to speak to you, you're an open channel and you can receive those messages clearly, so that you're observant of what's happening. And I have noticed that spiritual work has become almost like another crutch for a lot of people. Like, doing the energy work, and like, it's something that can actually make a lot of people stuck and unhappy in the present moment, because they're constantly like fine combing everything that they are and being like, oh, okay, when I release this money mindset block or whatever, I will finally be happy in business and new clients will arrive. When I heal this part of my inner child, my relationship with my mother is finally going to be fine. It has become one of those things where you are continuously being told this aspect of you that you need to be working on. And I think the real magic lies with actually finding yourself, finding the answers within yourself, not trying to outsource it from everything that's out there, not relying on tarot cards to give you all the answers. And this is coming from a tarot reader, not relying on other people like other people and external things outside of your own body and intuition to provide answers. And I think that is how you find God. Because you learn to trust yourself and you learn to trust your own cues, and that's how you can then hear the voice of God.
Yeah, I think that as well, because ultimately, like, God already dwells within you. So it doesn't really matter how you perceive it. Like, that is how you find it, because God already lives in your heart, and he already knows you. So it's like finding something that already knows you, but it's still you that has to find it. Like, you can't just expect it to come to you. Like, even though it's already living in you, you have to be the one to seek it out and to uncover it.
Yeah, 100%. And it is like diving within the self. Because what I've noticed is a lot of people do lean towards, like, wanting to know things through oracle cards and tarot cards, and wanting for other people to give them the answers so that they eventually end up in a place where they finally notice the presence of God, where it's almost like they feel like they have to do something. They have to reach a certain state or have a certain piece of knowledge before they can welcome God's presence in their life. But it's not true, because we're all already inherently worthy of God. We're all inherently connected to God. God is already within us, and it is about being able to tune into that voice that is sometimes very overpowered by logic, lack of trust, maybe lack of previous evidence, and like a million of other things that make it difficult to tune into that channel.
What would you say, like, kind of helped you, or was there like a moment when you kind of realized that these things can't be, or this essence really that you're looking for, you still have to look for it, but you have to look for it within? Like, you can't seek it externally. It's like you said, it's not like you just stop looking, but and it's not even like you look in a different place. You're not just pivoting, you're completely switching off the external and you're flipping it to come within. Like, did you have a kind of moment when you realized that's what I need to be doing? Or did you like hear the voice of God speak to you, or what changed in that respect?
Let's have a think about that. Very good question. What changed for me? I do ultimately think that spiritual maturity is about creating space for co-creation between you and God. So it's the fine balance between, these are the things that I desire, and I'm going to take the action towards them because I trust that my desires are here for a reason. But ultimately, I surrender it to God. And if you want me to go somewhere else, you tell me. And also vice versa. Whatever plan you have for me, I'm going to go do it. But unless you tell me otherwise. And I think that's something that I actually thinking about now. I think it started like about 14, 15 months ago, when I was doing a lot of inner work on my heart chakra, because that girl was wounded. There was a lot of things that I was carrying from past lifetimes. There was like so much that was coming up whenever I did Akashic Records. And I remember after one session that I held for myself, actually, which was quite a fun thing, that it sort of came from, my own inner work. I realized that I needed to take responsibility for the part that I played in wounding my heart space, which was something that I've never considered of in all those years. I always saw my experiences, particularly with like how many walls I put around my heart, as results of things that I've experienced, and I didn't consider my own part in it. And it was at that point that I then started to, like, this theme of responsibility and accountability that started to really take part in my life, where I've started to recognize that there is a need for the fine balance between, yes, sometimes you do desire validation, maybe through oracle cards, or you ask the universe to send you signs because you're torn, but ultimately you need to be grounded in yourself in order to continue moving through life, because God's already decided what's going to happen. And even though I do believe that things can change, it is our human responsibility to also take charge, to not be completely passive and hand everything off to God, because we will lose ourselves in that. So I would say definitely sort of the last 14 months or so has been like a big realization. It's probably been a great process of spiritual maturity, actually, because before it was still in place. Yes, it was. I still had a lot of trust for myself and trust for God's plan, for sure. But I think it has completely scaled and become even more embodied now. Yeah, I think that's what did it for me.
Yeah, that's amazing, because I thought when you were saying that, it just came to me like the voice of God speaks through you. And so that also helps me remember that I'm not God as well. That, like, yeah, I was made in God's image. Like, there's a deep connection, but I am not God. Like, I have God's essence within me. I have source within me. I have creation within me. I have passion within me. I have cycles of death and rebirth within me. But I am still not like that power, if you like. Like, I have, it's like a firework, I guess. Like, you have the remnants of that firework within you, and in those remnants there is like potential for zero limitation. Like, there's literally unlimited possibility, but the thing that set the actual firework itself is the thing that created those remnants. So even if you create something so unlimited, like we said in the last podcast we did, like, it has to be given back so that it can, you know, continue that cycle. And I think that helps so much. I think that's why, like, funnily enough, like, I feel like there's such a, and then this also might just be because maybe I'm just too chronically online and I'm just like noticing all this stuff, but I think this is probably one of the reasons why there's such a big kind of like taboo, let's say, between what everyone is calling New Age versus like Christianity and things like that. And even yesterday at church, I was discussing it with one of the pastors, not one of the pastor's wives, like he only has one wife, but I mean, one of the pastors, his wife. She's a yoga teacher, and another couple at church, they call themselves cultural bridge builders. So they kind of like, they have their own business where they're organizing events for the international community here in Lyon. And one of the things that we're organizing together is like a family yoga session. So it's going to be like parents, kids, that kind of thing. And they're just advertising it. We decided to advertise it as like stretching wellness kind of thing, so that it appeals to more people. And we were talking about that, and she was saying, the pastor's wife was saying, like, oh, you know, I wish we could destigmatize this this whole thing that Christians can't do yoga. And I was like, oh yeah, that's going to be the never-ending feat, because it's just never going to be understood. You know.
Yeah.
And you hear all these conversations like on these, especially these Christian podcasts and stuff, who talk about, and then you also hear the reverse. I get so much stuff advertised on my YouTube that I just think, are you like rage baiting me, YouTube? I think you are.
Yeah.
I think you're just like adding to my existential crises. I get advertised podcasts that are like, X witch talks about the dangers of blah 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 blah, and then on the other side I get advertised podcasts that are like the dangers of public celebrity ministry that's happening in the Christian world. And it's like these two extremes that I feel like they lack like the, and not always, like sometimes they do they can make good points, they can talk about interesting things, as not to take away from their experience, but they lack like the nuance and the authenticity of real life, of real conversations like this, of what real conviction to God looks like. Like it doesn't always look like these extreme scenarios of God convicted me of this, or God took me from this kind of thing. It's not always that drastic, actually.
I agree, and I'm glad that we're talking about this actually. I'll explain why shortly, but I do feel like we are in an era of combination of like their religion and spirituality, but for so long religious itself was used as a way to control so many people, and it was done in such a standardized, structured way, and there was so much hierarchy involved that it was like, look, these are the rules, and it was actually used to manipulate the masses and manipulate the word of God in order to fit the agenda of the ruling classes.
Yes, yeah.
And so everything, I'm literally getting shivers, so everything became very structured, and you couldn't go against the structures for multitude of reasons also, because, well, a lot of the lower classes simply didn't have the means to, in past cultures, societies, whatever, you would have been punished for it. Even as recent as 100 years ago, if you said anything that was outside of the norm, you were stigmatized. So there's still remnants of that, of those structures being into play. And I think there's people who do still hold on to the rigidity of it, because that's how it's always been done. But that's the issue. It's always been done, but not coming from an actual place of God. It wasn't coming from a place of, hey, let me help you connect to yourself and, feel fulfillment and serve God. It was like, do these because I need to control you. Do these or you're going to die. And for example, if we think about the teachings of Mary Magdalene, which are not in the Bible, they have been so stigmatized because they do encourage that individual self-expression, that individual self-belief, which is what I think, which is the era that we've entered right now, of combining the inner work and the self and seeing ourselves in the image of God, as opposed to seeing God as the person who punishes, and that sin is going to be horrible, and we need to be this devoted in a certain way, otherwise something bad is going to happen.
Yeah, definitely. And then that's actually like the neglect of that, acknowledging that kind of truth, is actually what perpetuates those extremities in views, like that extremity of like God is going to punish you, like actually misconstruing and misunderstanding what it means to fear God. Because fearing God is important, but it really takes a long time to understand what that actually means. Because even for a long time, it's only really recently, like in the last like month or so, that I've actually come to understand and not with my mind, but with my heart, like what that actually means to fear God. It doesn't mean to be afraid of God, because it says, I think it says 365 times in the Bible, do not be afraid.
Yes.
True fear of God is not about being fearful, but it's about having unwavering faith. Because there's a point that reminds me of a point, I think it's in Luke, is it in Luke? I think, let me have, was it in, no, it's in Matthew, and Jesus says that when you get to the gates of heaven, it doesn't matter if you've done everything right, it doesn't matter how much you've prophesied, it doesn't matter how much you've spread the name of Jesus Christ, it doesn't matter how much you threw yourself at his feet in humility. If you didn't do the will of the Father, Jesus is going to rebuke you and say that he never knew you. And that is something that it kind of, if you just read that, or if you just hear that, you think, well, that's horrible, like that's not very Jesus, like why would he do that? But then if you go back to, I think it's in John, I can't remember where, but it's in John, Jesus says that the will of the Father is to have faith. All you need to do to get Jesus to accept you, and obviously I'm talking about this from the lens of Christianity, but you can relate it back to what we were talking before about this idea of fearing God and thinking that it's something that this loving energy that created you is actually something scary to be afraid of. But it's talking, like I said, through the lens of Christianity. Jesus is saying that all you need to do is to have faith. Like that's literally all you need to do for Jesus to say that he knew you. Because if you don't have faith, him saying that he didn't know you is not him rebuking you, it's just him being honest. Because yes, he's all knowing, so he knows you, but to a degree, because he's the living God, the one that came in the flesh, you need to open yourself up to him for that relationship to be mutual, because relationships can't be one-sided. Even if someone knows everything about you, literally every single detail, if it's not reciprocated, you can't come to the end of your life and expect love from that person that you didn't reciprocate the love that they gave you, and say, what do you mean you don't know me? And they'll say, well, yeah, I know every single thing about you. I know your heart. I know your thoughts. I know everything that you don't even know, but you didn't take the time to get to know me. So how can I say that I really know you?
Wow.
Relationship then, you know?
Wow. And it's, this is so beautiful. And I think this really relates to the fact that a lot of people only come to God when things go wrong. I love to ask people in the everyday, like how often, like whether they pray, like what's their relationship to prayer, like what do they think when it comes to prayer. And a lot of people do tell me that they pray mostly when things go wrong. I'm like, no. That's it. No, full stop. Because you don't need to pray in moments when things are going good, because God has helped you with that. Like, yes, you took the action, well done you, but God helped you with it, basically. And we need to be coming to God with our hearts full of gratitude. So I really liked what you shared there about the need to get to know God also, because otherwise it's not coming from a pure place of love and devotion. It's coming from the ego of this is what I want, or this is what I think God wants of me. And all you do is ask, and never create the space to listen.
Yeah. And I do think, like, to an extent, that is one of the reasons why I think, and this is not even anything to do with Christianity at all. Well, it is, but it isn't. Like, it doesn't, you don't have to resonate with that to hear this. But I think that's one of the reasons why people find it so much easier to associate what they believe God with the universe. Because it's my belief that the universe has its own powers and has its own consciousness and is like an extension of God, but it's not God. And I think I do think like deep down the majority of people actually know that, but because like you said, a lot of it is ego based, a lot of it is like I want this, like abundance mentality. And you like convince yourself into thinking that that's not that it's, well, you convince yourself into thinking that that is really positive, basically. And like, oh, if I think in abundance and like manifest this and whatever, like this is the way to live. But you're kind of then not acknowledge not you're then refusing to acknowledge the character of God. Because when you think about the universe, for me anyway, when I sort of saw the universe as God, I didn't see the universe as having like a character. I just kind of saw this universe as this positive characteristics, like this abundant, vast existence, but there's something that I could take anything I wanted from, because anything I put out will come back. Anything that I, what you resist persists, what you, whatever, like what you, attract, blah blah blah, all of that, law of attraction, etc. It exists, but to what end? So even the universe, because I believe that the universe does hear you, but the universe is like, yeah, but go to this guy, go to, or however you perceive God, like go to the one that created me and that created my consciousness. Because even it also talks in the Bible, I can't remember if it's in a psalm or something, like it talks, it's in a psalm, I don't remember which one, but it talks about, it says like the rivers are praising God, like while the stream is flowing and everything. And it talks about the different elements and parts of the earth. And to me, that is evidence that God created these elements of earth and the ether with consciousness, but he didn't create them to be him, because even they are praising him.
That's so beautiful. And I do really resonate with that, because I always saw the universe as like, when I think about it, I see it as like universe as like galaxy and more, and like the most like the galaxy, like the cosmos, everything that, let's say, that is around, I'm gonna say, for the simplest way to put it. But then God is still above that. Like that is how I see it, like literally above that, as like even more of a vast and a brighter source of creation. And then like I believe in other dimensions. So then I'm like, to what extent is that the universe?
Right.
Which is why, to me, it is more resonant to call it God. And that the universe is very much an extension of God, a huge extension that I resonate with. But something I want to circle back to that is very important is like one thing that I have become very disapproving of, I can't remember if we've spoken about this, is like manifestation. And like, I believe it. I wholeheartedly believe it. I understand the laws of the universe. I don't discredit them. I would never say they're not real. But I feel like it's become that part of spirituality where people are just like, well, I'm just going to manifest, and it is that ego-driven response of them thinking these are the things that I desire. So they try to put this out into the universe, and they're missing out the signs that the universe is saying. That's like, okay, go to God. And the same approach of like what we're speaking about, like about sin and everything. How I've seen people post things like, negative energy is not real. I don't need to do protection work because, it's entities can't come harm you. And while to a certain extent, I am a believer in the fact that, if you do hold the belief that, I don't know, you've got someone put evil eye on you and you're going to be harmed unless you protect yourself, I do believe, yes, that will end up harming you. So there needs to be a balance where you do some protection work without necessarily obsessing over it and feel like it's going to impact you every single day. But I have noticed where people do say, those negative energies don't exist. I think that really feeds into this individualistic view of
Mhm.
spirituality and God and
Mhm.
creation, of like, okay, no, I desire, like, I make God in my image,
Mhm.
as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah. Oh, it's so true. It's so good. And because I think like people, there's an extent to which when you can, again, it kind of comes back to the idea of separation, which is
Mm.
funny because what happened in the Old Testament is that we were separated from God. So that's something that I like about the Bible, is that it's in a way it's logical, in a way it's grounded. It's saying this did actually happen. Like we were separated from God. It's not all like airy fairy, whatever. We were separated from God, but God wants us to come back to him.
Mm.
And I think it is easier to see God as the universe and see it as this vast, beautiful entity, which it is, that has a vast, unlimited consciousness, which it does, that supports you and conspires in your favor, which it does. But it's it's easier to see that as the thing that's gonna give you what you want out of life and help you to create your reality, because realistically I never saw the universe as a creator. I never saw the universe as like
That's so true.
ultimate source energy. I would always say like, oh, source, blah blah blah, but I was always, deep down, I was talking about something else. I knew that I was talking about like this little
Something
pinpoint of,
deeper than this just universe.
right, yeah, something that you can have a relationship with, because I don't know if you can really have a, well, I suppose the word relationship can be defined in so many ways. So I'm not saying like you can't have a relationship with the universe, because it does have its own consciousness, but the way that you have a relationship with the universe, to me, is the same way that you have a relationship with nature. Like it's beautiful and it's amazing and it's healing, but it's not, it's creation. Like
Mm.
you are creation, and the thing with you and nature and the universe is that you're not separated. And because we know that, that's what enables us to see us and the universe as one, and thus to see us as God, and thus to help us to think that we can then create our reality and be the one that has the hand and has the will, like our will be done, not
Yes.
his will be done. And I think if you can kind of step out of that and just actually see how beautiful it is that we are one with the universe and with nature, and that there is no separation there, but then to seek to have a relationship with the one that created all of you harmoniously, and
Mm.
then rebuild that separation that you have with God, that's going to just skyrocket your connection, because it's going to be so different and it's going to be like more challenging, I think, but it's going to fill a sense of emptiness that, like, when you're manifesting things, you're either in this space where you're manifesting things and you don't know why they're not happening, and so you kind of feel that emptiness, or you're manifesting so much and you're constantly manifesting more and more and more, even if that's not, let's say that doesn't even have to do anything with financial wealth. It could be in any sense. You're manifesting more, you're taking charge, like I said, my will be done. But you're still filling a void because it's never enough.
Mm.
um, and actually that void can be filled by seeking to bridge that gap between you and God.
Absolutely. All about that co-creation.
So that's what co-creation actually means. Like,
Yeah. Full stop. That is so beautiful.
so to finish off, I've got my little oracle card deck here.
Ooh.
And I'll just run my hand over it, and then you tell me when to stop, and I'll stop, and we'll see what the card is. And
Okay.
I'll look at the description.
Now.
Okay, that was a very clear one. Oh, okay, let's have a look.
Number one.
Yeah, that was definitely like done. It was right there. Okay, I'm trying to do this with one.
It is one.
So the card is this. I'll show you. Can you see that kind of?
Nurture. Okay.
And that's
Ooh.
the plant the seeds to sow tomorrow. A hand outstretched and a cure offered in return. Alleviate suffering, allow another to thrive. Give a piece of yourself, but also nurture a practice of protection of self. Wow, I just got shivers.
Wow.
That's co-creation.
That is literally co-creation.
Wow, that's amazing, isn't it? I don't know what to say.
I know.
That's the end of that.
And I love the fact that there's a flower growing also, like
Yes.
literally nature.
And the picture is kind of like the flower and the person growing it are made up of the same essence, like the same colors, the same vibe.
It's beautiful.
That's amazing. I love that so much. Thank you.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, literally. Thank you, God.
Well, thank you, Marcy, for coming back on the podcast. Luckily, there was no interruption this time.
Oh my God, yes. It's been my pleasure.
I'll put the link to our first episode together and to the episode we did on your podcast as well. But yeah, if you have any final random free time thoughts or anything, feel free to share, or if you want to let people know what you offer or anything that you want to add, feel free. You're free. You're no
I am free. I'm a free woman. Honestly, I offer various different things. My offer suite is being changed and upgraded right now. So I'd say whenever you're listening to this, whenever this is published, just find me on Instagram, marcy's.magic, and stay up to date.
Perfect. I love that. For the multi-passionate beings, just find it all in one place.
Yep.
It's constantly evolving. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Marcy, so much for coming back on the podcast. And I'm sure we'll have a part 3 at some point.
For sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.